You know that feeling? End of a totally normal day, maybe work, errands, nothing crazy, but you just feel completely, utterly wiped out.
Oh yeah, that bone-deep, tired feeling.
Exactly. And sleep doesn't even seem to make a dent. Well, imagine that feeling turned way up, like becoming your constant reality, stopping you from doing things you used to do easily.
It's kind of where we're headed today.
Right. We're diving deep into myalgic encephalomyelitis. It's often called chronic fatigue syndrome or MECFS. And let me tell you, it is so much more than just feeling tired.
Absolutely. And we've got some really good information here from Johns Hopkins Medicine to help us unpack it.
Yeah, think of this as a shortcut to getting the essential info on what is honestly a pretty complex condition.
That's the plan. We want to pull out the key stuff from this Johns Hopkins resource,
Mm.
what ME/CFS actually is, the symptoms, potential causes, risk factors, how it's diagnosed, and what the treatment options look like.
Okay.
And just to note, the Hopkins info does mention rising measles cases at the start, but we're laser focused on ME/CFS today. Got it. So ME/CFS, let's get right to it. What is it exactly? Because just saying chronic fatigue,
Hmm.
it really undersells it, doesn't it?
It really does. So, Johns Hopkins defines ME/CFS as a long-term condition. The big thing is a major drop in activities you could previously handle.
Okay.
And this comes with this deep, persistent tiredness that crucially isn't relieved by rest or sleep.
Wow. So sleep doesn't fix it.
Nope. And it can creep up gradually, or sometimes it hits quite suddenly. And unfortunately, it can stick around for years.
Years. That sounds incredibly disruptive.
It can be, absolutely. And a really key feature, something that sets it apart, is that symptoms actually get worse after physical or even mental effort.
Worse after activity.
Yeah, even minor stuff. It's called post-exertional malaise, PEM for short. We'll definitely talk more about that. Even just standing for too long can trigger symptoms.
Hmm.
And the impact on life, it can be huge, affecting work, school, social life. I mean, in severe cases, people can end up basically housebound. That really paints a picture. Okay, so what's going on inside the body? Any ideas about the causes?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, really. Research is ongoing. The exact cause or causes aren't fully nailed down,
Mm-hmm.
but the Johns Hopkins info points to a few potential triggers. Infections are definitely on the list.
Like what kind of infections?
Things like infectious mononucleosis, Mono 8,
Mm-hmm.
and also SARS-CoV-2, the COVID-19 virus. It's actually quite striking how many people with long COVID also fit the criteria for ME/CFS.
Oh, interesting. So there's an overlap there.
Seems like it, yeah. Suggests maybe shared pathways or something. But it's important to say, sometimes there's no clear starting event identified.
So it's not always linked back to getting sick?
Not always obvious, no. Another angle is genetics. They've noticed ME/CFS can sometimes run in families.
Suggesting a predisposition.
Possibly, yeah, some kind of inherited susceptibility. And then there's the immune system. Research is looking hard at that.
Okay.
Well, a lot of people with ME/CFS also report having things like allergies, reactions to foods or meds, hives, maybe getting infections frequently. It points towards the immune system potentially being involved, maybe dysregulated.
Wow, okay, so it sounds like a really complex picture. Are there specific things that make someone more likely to get it? Any risk factors?
Yes, Hopkins highlights a few. Gender is a big one. It's diagnosed way more often in females, like 2 to 4 times more often than males.
Really? 2 to 4 times.
Yeah, quite a difference. Age is another factor. It's not common in kids under 10. It tends to start more often in adolescence or young adulthood.
Okay,
But interestingly, it doesn't seem to get more common as people get older.
that's useful to know. Now, you mentioned something earlier, joint hypermobility, flexible joints. What's that about?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Apparently, adolescents with ME/CFS are about 3.5 times more likely to have really flexible joints, be double jointed.
Huh, but they don't know why.
Exactly. The connection isn't clear yet.
Yeah.
How being extra flexible might relate to getting ME/CFS. Well, that needs more research to figure out.
Okay, so we have a better sense of what it is, some potential factors. But what does it actually feel like day to day? What are the main symptoms?
Right, the lived experience.
Yeah.
According to the Johns Hopkins info, the Institute of Medicine pinpoints 4 core symptoms needed for diagnosis.
Core ones. Okay.
First, that substantial drop in activities you used to be able to do, along with major fatigue. We covered that.
Right.
Second, post-exertional malaise, or PEM. This is huge. It's the worsening of symptoms after even minor physical or mental exertion.
Mental exertion, too.
Yes, and the kicker is, it usually gets worse 12 to 48 hours later. and can last for days, even weeks.
Oh, wow. So it's delayed and long-lasting.
Exactly. It's not just feeling tired the next day. It can be a massive crash. It forces people to completely rethink how they plan anything. It's like this systemic relapse triggered by doing too much.
That sounds incredibly difficult to manage. Okay, what's the third?
Third is unrefreshing sleep. Waking up feeling just as tired or sometimes even more tired than when you went to bed. Doesn't matter how long you slept.
Ugh. So fatigue, the PM crash, and sleep, that doesn't help. That alone sounds awful. You said there were either criteria too?
That's right. So you need those 3 core symptoms, plus you need to have either orthostatic intolerance or cognitive impairment.
Okay, let's break those down. Orthostatic intolerance.
That's trouble with being upright. So symptoms like feeling lightheaded, dizzy, having trouble thinking or concentrating, plus worsening fatigue that kick in fairly quickly when you're sitting up or standing for a while. Often there's also a noticeable increase in heart rate or sometimes a drop in blood pressure when standing. Lying down might help a bit temporarily, but the fatigue and that foggy thinking can stick around.
So simple things like standing in line, showering.
Yeah, exactly. Standing in line, shopping, showering, even just being in a hot room can be really tough for people with orthostatic intolerance.
Okay, I see. And the other option was cognitive impairment, the brain fog thing.
Yes, commonly called brain fog. This means having trouble following conversations, paying attention, remembering things, sometimes struggling to find the right words.
So it affects thinking clearly.
Definitely. People often say they can still do mental tasks, but it takes way more effort. It's much less efficient than before. They feel mentally slower, less sharp.
Okay. So to get diagnosed, it's those 3 core symptoms: the activity drop fatigue, the PM, the unrefreshing sleep, plus either the standing sitting issues or the brain fog.
Correct. And typically, according to Hopkins, these symptoms need to have been going on for at least 6 months.
6 months. That's a long time to feel like that before getting answers.
He is. But they do note that treatment or management strategies can often start sooner if the pattern looks like ME/CFS, even before hitting that 6-month mark.
Good to know. Are there other symptoms people might experience?
Yes, the resource lists quite a few others that can occur, though not everyone gets them all. Things like new kinds of headaches, joint pain but without swelling, muscle aches. Also, a feeling of tightness, maybe in the arms, legs, or spine, making it hard to, say, lift your arms overhead. Heat intolerance, heart palpitations, or a fast heart rate, sometimes fainting, sore throat, tender lymph nodes in the neck.
That's quite a list.
It is. And it's really important to remember, these can be caused by many other things too. So you absolutely need a doctor to check things out properly for a diagnosis.
Right. Given all those possible symptoms, and you said earlier there's no single test, diagnosis must be tricky.
It can be quite challenging, yes.
Yeah.
It often involves ruling out other conditions first.
Okay, so let's talk treatment then. If diagnosis is complex and there's no single cause, what can be done?
Well, the Johns Hopkins info is up front. There's no one-size-fits-all cure that works consistently for everyone.
Right.
But there are definitely strategies to help ease specific symptoms. Medications can play a role for things like headaches, pain, maybe those heart rate or blood pressure issues, sometimes even to help with the cognitive difficulties. And gentle manual physical therapy can sometimes help with muscle and joint tightness, improving movement without triggering that PE.
And you mentioned activity management earlier, pacing.
Yes, activity management or pacing is absolutely crucial. It's all about finding that balance between rest and activity.
To avoid the crashes.
Exactly. Learning your own energy limits your energy envelope and trying really hard to stay within it. Pushing past it leads to that post-exertional malaise flare-up.
Sounds like a constant balancing act.
It really is. For some people, very light intensity aerobic exercise might be incorporated, but it has to be designed super carefully to not make symptoms worse.
Tricky. What about other things? Supplements? Therapies?
The source mentions things like salt tablets potentially for the orthostatic issues, dietary supplements, herbal products, but always stresses talking to your doctor first.
Of course.
And psychotherapy or counseling can be really important too. Not to treat the ME/CFS itself, but to help cope with living with a chronic illness. Anxiety and depression can understandably come along with this, and therapy can help manage that.
That makes a lot of sense. It must take a toll mentally. Did the article mention managing specific things like the dizziness?
It did. For dizziness or lightheadedness, it suggests a doctor might check heart rate and blood pressure responses, maybe recommend increasing water and salt intake, using support stockings, or possibly medication.
Oh,
For the post-exertional malaise, it really just comes back to that careful pacing and avoiding prolonged upright time. Maybe, shopping at off-peak hours to avoid long lines.
practical tips. What about sleep?
Sleep issues are so common. A doctor might suggest seeing a sleep specialist or potentially trying medication to improve sleep quality because unrefreshing sleep is such a core part of it.
And the pain.
Again, talk to a doctor before just taking over-the-counter stuff. They might look into food sensitivities too. But things like gentle physical therapy, massage, even support groups can help manage pain and the impact it has. Counseling can be part of managing chronic pain as well.
It really sounds like a very personalized, multi-pronged approach is needed. Manage the symptom, manage that one.
That's pretty much it, yes.
Yeah.
Targeting the individual's most bothersome symptoms, since there isn't one magic bullet.
The article also had a section on kids with ME/CFS. I imagine that brings unique challenges.
Absolutely. School's a big one. Kids might struggle with assignments because of memory issues, concentration problems, just general fatigue making learning hard.
Yeah, I can see that.
And absences can become frequent. The information notes that sometimes, before diagnosis, these struggles might be misunderstood as the child just trying to avoid school.
Oh, that's tough.
It really is. So it highlights how crucial it is for parents or guardians to work super closely with the school, getting the right support, accommodations, making sure teachers understand.
That communication seems vital. What about outside school? Social stuff.
That gets impacted too, sadly. Often kids just don't have the energy or they feel too unwell after school to do the fun things they used to enjoy with friends or family. So the resource really emphasizes the role of parents again in carefully monitoring activity levels, helping the child pace themselves, but still finding ways to have some quality time, some connection within those limits. It's a real tightrope walk for the whole family.
It definitely sounds like it requires a huge adjustment from everyone. Okay, last point from the source. When should someone get medical advice? If they suspect this or if things change?
The advice is clear. Call your doctor or healthcare provider if your symptoms get worse or if new symptoms pop up.
Right, don't just assume it's the ME/CFS.
Exactly. It's essential for getting the right diagnosis in the first place and also for ruling out anything else that might be going on and needs different treatment.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. Thinking back on our deep dive using this Johns Hopkins info, what are the absolute key takeaways about ME/CFS?
I'd say the big ones are ME/CFS is serious, it's long-term, and it's way more than just tiredness. That post-exertional malaise, the crash after activity, is a defining feature,
Yeah, that really stood out.
along with the unrefreshing sleep, and then either the cognitive issues, the brain fog, or the problems with being upright, the orthostatic intolerance. Diagnosis takes time and meeting specific criteria.
And no single cure yet.
No single cure, unfortunately. But management focuses on easing symptoms through various strategies, like pacing, medication for specific issues, therapy, and support.
This has been incredibly informative, really highlights how much this condition impacts every aspect of life, far beyond just feeling fatigued.
It really does. And, it makes you think, doesn't it? How does really understanding something like ME/CFS challenge our everyday assumptions about energy, about activity, about what being sick really means?
That's a deep question.
And maybe what kind of shifts do we need, maybe societally, to better support people living with these kinds of chronic, often invisible illnesses? How can we foster more empathy for those daily struggles? Definitely something worth pondering.